Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a profoundly tragic story. It's complex, deeply personal. We're talking about the death of Paloma Shemirani. She was just 23, a bright Cambridge graduate who passed away from cancer in 2024.
Yeah, and what makes this case really stand out, and it's incredibly heartbreaking, are the claims from her own brothers, Gabriel and Sebastian. They're alleging that their mother's, let's say, entrenched anti-medicine conspiracy theories directly influenced Paloma's decision, her decision to refuse life-saving chemotherapy.
It's a huge claim, and it makes this not just a personal tragedy, but frankly, a stark warning.
Exactly. And it's not, totally isolated, which is maybe the most unsettling part. We've actually heard from cancer doctors, like oncologist Dr. Tom Rokes, who are noticing this trend. These beliefs, which were once sort of confined to the fringes, they seem to be becoming dangerously mainstream, and they're impacting critical life or death medical decisions.
It really shows a worrying shift, doesn't it, in public trust and just understanding basic science
It
sometimes.
does.
So our mission today really is to unpack this specific case. We want to use it as a lens, if you like, to look at a much broader challenge in society. We'll explore how this potent mix of, well, medical misinformation, really deep family dynamics, and of course the huge reach of social media, how it all converges.
It converges to create these absolutely devastating outcomes.
Yeah, it's a vital deep dive, we think, for anyone trying to navigate today's, let's face it, very complex information landscape.
So just to give you the immediate picture on Paloma, she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Now, medically speaking, her prognosis was actually quite strong. They gave her an 80% chance of survival with standard chemotherapy.
8%. That's significant.
It is. But she ultimately refused that treatment. And tragically, she died just 7 months later.
Just awful. And her brothers, Gabriel and Sebastian, they've been incredibly open, haven't they, about why they're sharing this incredibly painful part of their lives.
They have. Their main goal, they say, is to try and prevent other families from going through the same kind of grief, the same loss. Gabriel said something that really, really sticks with you. He said, "I wasn't able to stop my sister from dying, but it would mean the world to me if I could make it, that she wasn't just another in a long line of people that die in this way."
Wow. That's powerful. It's a real plea, isn't it, for public awareness, for change.
And it absolutely raises that essential question about accountability,
Yeah.
particularly for the platforms, the social media companies involved. The brothers strongly believe these companies need to do much more, take stronger action against medical misinformation.
And there's evidence for that concern, right? I mean, the BBC did some digging.
Yes, BBC investigations have consistently found that these dangerous, unproven theories, they're actively being recommended, even amplified on major social media sites. It's like this echo chamber, this self-feeding ecosystem that can push vulnerable people down some really dangerous rabbit holes.
Now, we should say, just for balance, Paloma's mother, Kate Shemirani, she presents a very different story, a counter-narrative.
That's right. She has publicly blamed the NHS for Paloma's death. And both she and her ex-husband have made these claims, though they're unsubstantiated, about medical interventions given without confirmed diagnosis or lawful consent.
But the BBC, who investigated this whole thing very thoroughly, they stated they found absolutely no evidence to support those specific claims.
Right, that's important context.
So to really understand how Paloma got to that point, making that fateful decision, we kind of need to go back to her childhood, her formative years. Because this wasn't some sudden switch for her, was it?
No, not at all. Paloma, her twin Gabriel, Sebastian, and their younger sister, they grew up in Uckfield, in Sussex. And in their home, conspiracy theories weren't just, talked about now and then. They were constant, a backdrop to their entire childhood.
Gabriel described it as the soundtrack to their school runs, listening to people like Alex Jones.
Yeah, discussing things like Sandy Hook being staged or 9/11 being an inside job. Imagine that being your daily reality on the way to school.
It's hard to fathom, and it started with their father.
Apparently, yes. Their father initially introduced these ideas, and then their mother became really interested, really took them on board. So the kids ended up just absorbing these truly outlandish concepts. Things like the royal family being shape-shifting lizards.
Lizards, wow.
Yeah, and Gabriel put it very clearly, the impact this has. As a young child, you trust your parents, so you see that as a truth.
That really highlights how insidious that early constant exposure can be. It doesn't just plant ideas, it actually sort of recalibrates a child's baseline for what's even real.
Exactly. It forms the very lens through which they see the world, which makes critical thinking later on exponentially harder.
And it sounds like that lens was actively, maybe even deliberately, reinforced. Sebastian mentioned his mother using these beliefs almost as a form of control.
He did. He talked about an instance where Shemirani switched off the Wi-Fi, said it was dangerous. This was when he urgently needed to submit his GCSE coursework online.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he felt she actually derived a kind of joy from using her irrational system of beliefs to control them. It paints a picture of manipulation, really, disguised as protection.
Understanding that early dynamic makes her later public persona even more striking, I think.
Definitely.
Because Kate Shemirani, the same mother controlling Wi-Fi with conspiracy theories, eventually took these beliefs global, styling herself as the natural nurse on social media.
And according to her sons, her anti-medicine views really intensified after her own breast cancer diagnosis back in 2012.
That seems like a key turning point.
It does. And what's interesting here is while she did have surgery to remove her tumor,
Right, conventional medicine.
yes, but she publicly credits alternative therapies for her recovery. She specifically mentions things like juices and coffee enemas.
Yeah.
She claims she's cancer-free, but she's quite careful, apparently, not to use the word cured.
That's a subtle but important distinction, isn't it? It lets her maintain credibility while still promoting these unproven methods.
Precisely.
And Paloma, even when she was young, was clearly absorbing all this. Her school friend, Chantel, remembered Paloma talking about her mother curing herself.
Yeah, and Paloma apparently believed herself that sunscreen could cause cancer. Chantel mentioned she got really badly sunburned at school because of it.
Oh, wow. So it shows just how deeply ingrained these ideas were, shaping her everyday choices long before the really critical medical ones came up.
And it highlights this powerful cycle of influence, almost generational.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though Paloma's brothers became estranged from their mother after the parents split,
Paloma stayed in touch.
yes, Paloma kept contact, even when she went off to Cambridge in 2019. Sebastian described her approach to her mother as this sort of desperate attempt to appease, to be sweet, to try and win the love that she hadn't been granted earlier.
That desire for connection, that must have created a real vulnerability.
It seems so. And we know from messages Paloma shared with her boyfriend at the time, and her Harris messages he later gave to the BBC, that it was a really troubled relationship. There were moments of love, yes, but also periods Paloma herself described as toxic and abusive.
Abusive?
Yes, she wrote about being so sick of being abused. And at one point, she even said her mother had hit her, calling it the last straw.
That's incredibly difficult context, that troubled bond, that push-pull for her mother's affection. It really helps understand her later choices, maybe.
Absolutely. It's critical for understanding the dilemma she faced. Because while she was at Cambridge, she did show some signs of independence, little fickers.
Like what?
Well, moving away from some of her mother's stricter beliefs, starting to eat meat, using fluoride toothpaste, things like that.
Okay, small rebellions.
Small, but significant maybe. However, both Chantel and Ander confirmed she remained very skeptical of the COVID-19 vaccine and refused it.
Ah, so those deeply held early beliefs were definitely still there under the surface.
Very much so, it seems.
And then came the diagnosis that just changed everything. Late 2023, Paloma starts getting chest pains, breathing difficulties.
Yeah, and in this heartbreaking attempt to maybe normalize something terrifying, she actually gave the suspected tumor a nickname.
What was it?
Maria the Lung Mass.
Oh, Paloma, that's just trying to cope, I suppose.
Trying to cope. But then, December 22nd, at Maidstone Hospital, she got the devastating diagnosis, non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And doctors told her straight, 80% chance of recovery with chemotherapy. A moment of stark truth.
And right at that moment, her mother's direct intervention becomes really clear.
Critically apparent. While Paloma was still an inpatient at Maidstone, Kate Shemirani sent a text message to Ander, Paloma's boyfriend. It was in all caps, full of typos apparently, and it read, "Tell Paloma Nit to sign or verbally consent to chemo or any treatment."
Wow, a direct order, undermining the medical advice right there.
Undermining it completely. Ander and his own mother were worried. They raised concerns with the hospital staff. The staff noted, and this is in the records, a concern regarding parental influence. But ultimately, they assessed Paloma as having the mental capacity to make her own decisions.
Which is legally correct, but doesn't account for that lifetime of influence.
Exactly. And at the same time, Paloma was also seeking advice from Patrick Vickers. He was her mother's former partner, an alternative health practitioner. He explicitly told her that the 80% chance of cure was exaggerated.
Undermining the doctors again.
Yes, and he pushed for Gerson therapy first. basically suggesting she should put off the conventional chemo.
Gerson therapy, can you just remind us what that involves?
Sure. For anyone less familiar, it's basically a very strict, rigorous plant-based diet. It involves specific juices, lots of supplements, and critically, coffee enemas, multiple times a day sometimes.
And the evidence for it treating cancer?
There is absolutely no scientific evidence that it works for cancer. Zero. And it carries potentially severe side effects, dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, serious organ issues.
So the tragic irony here is Paloma was understandably afraid of chemo's known side effects, like fatigue or hair loss.
Which are manageable, generally.
Right. But she embraced an alternative with unpredictable, potentially much more severe dangers.
It seems that way. And this all kind of came to a head around Christmas, a time that should be about comfort, family. But for Paloma, it became this period of intense pressure.
Andrew described her making the decision then to go with the Gerson therapy.
Yes. And then, on December 23rd, Kate Shemirani sent Andrew a voice note. Not asking, Andrew said, but instructing him. Take Paloma to her house. She even limited Paloma's plans to see a friend on Christmas Day.
Controlling the situation.
Completely. Andrew said he felt he could not argue. He described Paloma as being in fight-or-flight mode, totally overwhelmed, and her mother just kind of swooped in and took advantage of that.
It just shows the incredible power a parent can wield, even over an adult child, especially when they're that vulnerable. Maybe not even intentionally malicious, but the effect is the same.
It really does, and it illustrates this very effective, almost you could say, predatory approach to influence. Because Kate Shemirani didn't just hold these beliefs privately, she built an entire brand, a business around them. She was actively selling unproven stuff. Apricot kernels, supplements on her website.
And charging for advice.
Oh, yes. Charging £70 for annual memberships, £195 for consultations, or these 12-week programs for patients, including people with cancer.
So she's commercializing this misinformation. That definitely amplifies its reach. It makes it seem more legitimate to people who are desperate.
Absolutely. And her public statements about conventional medicine were just stark.
Yeah.
Unfiltered.
Like the chemotherapy comment.
Yeah, characterizing chemotherapy as pumping mustard gas into their veins, just deliberately designed to induce fear.
And her audience grew.
Massively. Especially during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Her alternative health stuff sort of morphed into these broader, sprawling, anti-establishment conspiracy theories. You know, the pandemic being a hoax, vaccines being part of some nefarious plan to kill people, all that kind of thing.
Did she face any consequences for this?
Initially, yes. She was struck off as a nurse in 2021, which is a big deal. And her social media accounts got suspended.
But they came back.
They did. When Elon Musk took over X, or Twitter as it was, a lot of these conspiracy theory accounts were reinstated, including hers. She also got back on Facebook and joined TikTok.
It really highlights the shifting sands of content monetization, doesn't it? How easily figures like this can regain their platforms.
It really does. And her influence now, it's far from gone. In just the last 6 months, her content got over 4.5 million views across the major sites.
4.5 million views.
Yep. And disturbingly, she's actively on X, inviting cancer patients to contact her directly. There are public examples of people reaching out, asking her for cancer advice.
So what are the platforms doing now?
Well, the responses vary. TikTok, to their credit, has banned her account again. Meta, who run Facebook and Instagram, say they don't allow harmful medical misinformation, but, well, she was reinstated there.
And X?
X hasn't responded to inquiries about her account or content.
This wider context seems crucial. Dr. Ropes, the oncologist you mentioned, he made a point about prominent figures, didn't he?
He did. He mentioned people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who we should note claims he supports safety tests. Not that he's anti-vaccine per se, but Dr. Roque's point was that figures like him make it much easier for other people to peddle false views.
Yeah.
It sort of normalizes these unproven theories, increases the risk of harmful alternative treatments becoming more mainstream, a very slippery slope.
And while all this was happening online, Paloma was undergoing the Gerson therapy. How was her health?
Sadly, it worsened significantly. Her friend Chantel recalled Paloma developing a new lump, but her mother apparently told her it meant the cancer was going out of her body, a truly dangerous misinterpretation of what was likely tumor progression.
Oh my God.
Chantel also described Paloma losing control of her bodily functions, just a harrowing sign of how far things had declined.
Was Paloma feeling pressure from others? Doctors? Friends?
It seems she was under immense pressure from all sides, really. Chantel mentioned Paloma felt pressured by doctors and friends who were urging her to reconsider chemotherapy. Paloma even talked about potentially cutting them off.
Pushing away the people trying to help with conventional advice.
Exactly. And Chantel herself, despite strongly disagreeing with the Gerson therapy, made that incredibly difficult decision to just try and remain supportive. She was terrified of being cut off completely if she pushed too hard.
It shows the impossible position friends and family get put in.
It really does. And adding to that, her mother seemed to have actively worked to isolate Paloma, tightening her control. Gabriel, her twin brother, wasn't allowed to meet her at one point. Why? Because their mother believed in bad air.
Bad air.
Yes. Convinced Paloma that the damp air near where Gabriel was would make her sicker. It just created this bubble of misinformation around Paloma when she most needed clear, objective support.
So Gabriel felt he had no choice but to take legal action.
That's right. This isolation meant he felt his only option was to start a legal case. Not to argue Paloma lacked capacity, importantly, but just to get an independent assessment of what appropriate medical treatment would be for her.
But it didn't get resolved.
Tragically, no. Events moved too quickly. The case ended without conclusion in July.
And Paloma died in July. She was just 23.
Yes. The cause of death was a heart attack, brought on by the tumor pressing on her heart. She was taken to hospital, put on life support, but after several days, it was switched off.
The grief for her family must be just unimaginable.
Profound. Shattering. Gabriel described his feeling like being burnt alive. Sebastian talked about blaming himself. Ander Harris, her boyfriend, said he just broke, was screaming and crying. It's an unbearable loss, leaving these incredibly deep scars.
And yet, despite this unbearable loss, her mother, Kate Shemirani, continues to promote these theories.
She does. On social media, on fringe podcasts, she's still promoting these unproven ideas. She's even claiming Paloma was murdered by medical staff and that there's been some kind of cover-up.
Is there any evidence for that?
Absolutely none. To be clear, zero evidence supports those claims. And there's an inquest pending, which will formally establish the circumstances surrounding Paloma's death.
It just highlights the continued danger of these narratives, doesn't it? Even when faced with such profound personal tragedy.
It really does.
For Gabriel and Sebastian, though, Paloma's death stands as this chilling, undeniable warning. A warning about the potential consequences for anyone who falls prey to these anti-medicine conspiracy theories. It's a call to action, really, born from the deepest possible pain.
Yeah, I think the core insight here, it isn't just that misinformation itself is dangerous, we know that, but its power seems to be massively magnified by our most intimate bonds by family. It really forces us to ask, doesn't it? Where do personal autonomy, family loyalty, and, public health actually intersect in this digital age? It's messy.
It is messy. Paloma's story, as utterly heartbreaking as it is, it really offers a profound lesson, I think. It's a stark reminder that in this world just saturated with information, the battle for truth isn't just playing out in public forums or online. It's often happening within the very walls of our own homes, within families.
So as you, listening, navigate your own sources of information, especially when it comes to critical things like health decisions, maybe consider this. What does it mean for you when those lines, the lines between personal conviction, maybe family influence, and established scientific consensus become dangerously blurred? And maybe the bigger question is, how do we ensure the most vulnerable people among us are protected in this increasingly complex digital age?
A really important question to leave our listeners with. Thank you for helping us unpack this incredibly difficult story today.
Thank you. It's vital we talk about these things.